All right. Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode numero 1. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Great news, Steve. The network has renewed us for Season 3. We're back. We got lots of exciting guests already planned.
It was close.
It was
Touch
close.
And go there for a while.
Lots of negotiations. And we've got a blockbuster episode and a few new things up our sleeves. So tell the people what's up for Season 3.
Well, a lot of what we're going to be doing is probably familiar and hopefully what people have enjoyed about the first 2 seasons. But one just little calendar note is we are going to be going bi-weekly for the summer, and then we'll revert to weekly after U.S. Labor Day. But we'll continue to have guests and try to theme many of these episodes around what's most interesting and important from our perspectives anyway in retail. But we are going to do a few more just Michael and I episodes, a little bit more content focused, not only carrying forward some of the themes that we've been talking about, that I cover in the book, but particularly in terms of what's really new and next for retail. I wrote an article the other day for Forbes about the hybridization of retail, which is a whole new area that I'm kind of exploring, which borrows some things that I'm sure people are pretty familiar with, but hopefully gets into things in a little bit different way. But so a mix of kind of these duet, whatever episodes, and then bringing on some big leaders from retail and other aspects of marketing and branding.
Well, true to what we advise all of our listeners to do, we looked at the metrics, and sure enough, our episodes together, where you and I are kind of riffing on our views, mostly yours, of strategy, and are very popular. So we thought that gives us a nice license to kind of have a mix with both guests and you and I chitting and chatting. Speaking of guests, our first episode today, and we'll get to it just in a minute, Blockbuster, the author of this book, Amazon Unbound, really... It was a great interview. We were so lucky to have him join us. We're so lucky to have an author like Brad Stone join us. And so keep an eye out for that, so to speak. That's coming up in a few minutes. First of all, anything catch your eye in the retail news in the past couple of weeks? We've been on a hiatus. The retail machine never stops. I've seen there's some IPO activity and there's some results. What jumped out at you over the past couple of weeks?
Well, we're at the tail end of earnings season. I guess thankfully get a little bit of a respite for a couple months. But Nike's earnings and Bed Bath & Beyond earnings really caught my attention. Nike, and full disclosure, they've been a past client. I worked with them a little bit at the beginning of what they call their consumer direct offense, which has been multiple years in the making. But the last quarter results were just amazing. Again, we've talked many times about whether we should compare what happens to what analysts thought, given that analysts have been generally pretty wrong, at least the last couple of quarters. But I mean, profitability was sky high. I have to check my notes here just in terms of some of the numbers, but digital was up 41% year over year, but that was 140% up over 2019.
Wow.
Total sales in North America up 29% on a 2-year basis. So if people aren't familiar, the essence of the strategy, the so-called consumer direct offense, has been to dial up their digital and e-commerce capabilities to go direct to consumer, but also pull back or narrow a lot of their wholesale distribution to invest behind their own store formats. And so they've got quite a few different formats that they're growing throughout the world. But it seems like they're just clicking on all cylinders. Really, the only weak spot was China, where there's a bit of a backlash to Nike, was only up 17%. So that was terrific.
What's interesting to me about Nike is a big part of that direct to consumer is the experience store strategy, right? Which gets you really geared up emotionally, whether you buy there or not, but to buy direct. And of course, that's been hobbled over the past 18 months by the COVID era, yet they still continue. I think they've got this big forward momentum that they created up to the COVID era. Of course, there's a tailwind with e-commerce that, of course, helps as well. But I think that it's interesting to see. I think they really got to get back to it, because I think that can erode pretty quickly in my mind, that they got to get back to their experience stores now that thankfully stores are opening up around the world.
Yeah, and one other number that's kind of related to that that I thought was pretty staggering, and I remember this was also a big push going back a few years, was their membership efforts. And they said in their earnings release that they have
Mm, mm,
300 million members worldwide, and so that's a customer data insight
wow.
factory, but that's also obviously a way to reach customers directly, more efficiently, in a more personalized basis. So I
Yeah.
think the fruits of that effort will, in addition to what you're talking about in terms of their physical store presence, will really be
Right.
something. And then Bed Bath and Beyond, I think fascinating company to watch, undergoing I guess they're about their second year of transformation. Mark Triton, their newish CEO,
Yep.
former Target executive, has been making a bunch of things happen, largely around private brand development, new marketing, decluttering their stores, emphasizing digital. Their numbers were mixed, I guess, in terms of, certainly sales were up a lot. They had a lot of stores that were
Mm,
closed. Their comps were like 86% year over year, but just up 3% on the 2 year basis. Their profitability was a little bit disappointing. They lost $51 million, I think it was, for the quarter. So that's not awesome, but they are investing behind a lot of new initiatives. So, pointed in the right direction,
yeah.
bunch of new leadership team, um, a bunch of new leaders joining, several folks that joined, including a friend of mine, Rafa Massoud, who's head of digital. So definitely one to watch, but not exactly lighten up the numbers quite yet. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, on the pro side, they had a bit of a tailwind with home, right? People investing in their home.
yes,
But on the negative side, I know stores here in Ontario and across Canada were either closed completely for like 150 days,
yeah,
like 150 days of store closure. It doesn't matter how much e-commerce you're going through, that's going to impact your numbers one way, shape, or another. So to be fair, I think they had this these two forces, and it's just hard to make up for store closures or store restrictions. 15% occupancy or whatever it was. I know that was the case on the Canadian side of the border, so I'm sure that held them back a little bit. No doubt, it would
yeah.
impact their growth. Now, there's a lot of IPO activity. We've talked about this before, but
Mhm.
you know what? You and I were talking off mic. What I find fascinating about the IPO activity is it gets us a look into the financials. And I remember when who was it? WeWork put out their
Right.
financial, their document.
We burn cash.
Scott Galloway took him to the woodshed.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Galloway
Yeah.
took him to the woodshed for that, rightly so. So who have we talked about? Allbirds and Warby Parker are
Yeah.
dropping IPOs, which I guess says active market. And mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the big news, or the main news, since we were last on mic, was Warby Parker confidentially filing. So we haven't seen the S1 yet to unpack those numbers. Several
Right.
others are rumored, of these digitally native brands, disruptive brands, whatever we want to call them, are rumored to be in the pipeline. And I think some of this, certainly in Warby's case, maybe in Allbirds' case, and a few others, is a reflection of both the maturity of their businesses. I mean, they've been around for a while. They need capital to grow.
Yeah.
Perhaps some of the founders want to take some, and investors want to take some money off the table. And the IPO market is super, super hot. So I think it's perfect timing in a lot of respects. But
Mm.
to your point, from the financials we have seen from some of these companies, whether it's the Real Real or, um, well, Chewy's is a little bit better, I suppose, Casper and others. A lot of these so-called disruptive brands are pretty far away from making money. So we'll
Right.
see. That doesn't mean
Right.
they're not good businesses long term, certainly. But it
Yep.
will be interesting to see Warby's numbers, which I suspect to be pretty good. But we'll see. So I think we got to watch the financials to see what that really tells us about the future and how far away these companies are from
Yeah.
being really big sustainable businesses. See what the valuation is like. Warby
Yeah.
Parker raised some money last year at a $2 billion valuation, I think it was. So I think we have a lot of interesting things that'll come to light in the next few weeks, from these IPOs that are already filed and some others that I suspect we'll see
Hmm.
before the fall.
Interesting. Well, speaking of takeover activity, M&A activity, there's a bit of a name I hadn't thought of since probably the last time I was in a barber chair when I was 14, Playboy. Playboy bought Australian-based Honey Burdette, which is a lingerie company. I know of Honey Burdette because there was some talk about expansion into Canada. So,
Mm.
other than that, the brand wasn't on my radar screen. But it's interesting, right? Playboy kind of gets out of publishing and has established a licensing group. But now this is a big buy, right? This is a couple $100 million getting into
Yeah.
retail. Interesting to watch, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it came so out of left field. I didn't really think of Playboy as being, well, to the extent they're still in the media business, which I'm not even sure to what degree they are, but getting into
Barely,
product
yeah.
and retail, very surprising. I guess I
Yep.
don't know enough about what Playboy has been up to and what Honey Birdette's really about to know whether this is good or bad. But it certainly is. Kind of a interesting, quirky thing to hit the radar screen.
Well, and it's certainly an active category. Everything from knitswear to, we've seen so many changes happening at Victoria's Secret,
Yeah.
and they're trying to turn that brand around. I mean, it's a busy, interesting category of retail. So
Hmm.
I just want to bring it up. It's one to watch. So let's keep an eye on that.
Sure.
The overall category, as I said, very interesting. Lots of M&A activity. Victoria's Secret bought a Canadian lingerie brand called Licenza a couple of years ago. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. A private equity company bought them last year. So anyway, lots of activity. But anyway, that's kind of the week's news. Anything else strike your fashion before we move on, or catch your eye, I should say, before we move off
No,
to
no.
our great
Other
interview
than
with Brett?
just continuing to kind of parse out a lot of the economic news, a lot of very favorable trends, certainly, but a lot of
Yep.
concerns in terms of supply chain and stimulus rolling off
Mm,
and labor issues. And so I think it's going to be a pretty bumpy
yep.
ride here, but mostly positive as we go forward.
Well, I think what we could promise our listeners is a great season because we got lots to talk about. I mean, coming out of the COVID era, this is going to be a fantastic, really interesting season 3 coming up. And again, every 2 weeks from now until Labor Day, and then we go back to weekly. Lots of people will be chatting to. But for now, let's get right to our great interview with Brad Stone of this book. Once again, Amazon Unbound, a weighty tome, but he's going to give us the high notes. Great discussion. So let's have a listen to that now.